Hello and good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Samantha Connell. I'm a librarian at New Canaan Library. I'm the coordinator of reference instruction and digital services, and I'm really excited about our program this evening. Tonight, we have Myka Meier with us. She's the author of Modern Etiquette Made Easy. I'm really excited because I just finished reading the book, and it was a wonderful, approachable way to tackle this concept of modern etiquette. Myka opened Beaumont Etiquette to bring a fresh and modern perspective to the industry. She broke down the stereotype that etiquette is perceived as outdated or inaccessible. She designed innovative and empowering etiquette courses with a modern spin, which are not intimidating to learn. She's a dual American and British citizen. She's a consultant specializing in international social and business etiquette and protocol. She studied at multiple traditional etiquette schools in the United Kingdom and trained in London under a former member of the royal household of Her Majesty the Queen. And she attended finishing school in Switzerland and has been formally trained in continental European, British, and American etiquette. Tonight, she's going to talk to us about etiquette. Just please know that your camera won't be on and your audio won't be on. Please use the Q&A feature to send us any questions you may have. We're going to save those towards the end, but please join me in welcoming Myka this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. I'm sorry that we can't be in person, but I kind of feel like this is as close as we possibly could be. So I'm excited tonight to have this time with you, and especially the Q&A at the end where you can kind of ask me anything you want. So it could be your most burning etiquette questions. It could be something about that I talked to you about today, or it could be about something in the book, maybe just anything. The holidays coming up, it's really this time is for you. So thank you for joining, and I'm going to go ahead and get started sharing my presentation with you today. Okay, so what I decided to do is kind of give you a mashup of both of my books. So the book that Sam just finished is called Modern Etiquette Made Easy. That's the one, if you're looking at your screen to the left, that's the yellow one. That was kind of my baby. That one I wrote in under 2 months. I couldn't stop writing. It was fun. It was just kind of the first chapter was just telling my story about how I came from a middle-class family, kind of growing up barefoot on a beach, to how I ended. There was this one very kind of major moment in my life where I'm serving Prince Charles a gin and tonic on a silver tray. And that moment, everyone's had it, where you kind of think, how did I get here? No matter if it's one of those moments or just a very funny time in your life, I think everyone can associate. So it was that first chapter, I was just telling Sam, this was very intentional because I wanted to show that etiquette, that anyone can learn it. And you don't have to, have money to learn it. You don't have to grow up in a certain household or, place to learn it, that anyone can learn it. And if I can do it, anyone can do it. So that was my intention there. And then a lot of what I kind of include in that yellow book, Modern Etiquette Made Easy, is also what we teach at the Plaza Hotel Finishing Program. So that's something that we started in 2016. It will be reopening. Sadly, the plaza is still closed, but in April 2021, we will be back in action with our kids, teens, and adult courses. And so this is a sneak preview now of what you will learn also in the plaza courses. All right, let's get started. So just to start, I always kind of like to start my courses really just explaining what etiquette truly is. And I love this statistic so much, I keep it on my website. So really, it's why is etiquette so important anyway? And what is it, right? A lot of people think it's kind of stuffy or only for the 1%. But that could not be more untrue. Etiquette is meant to be used every single day. And all etiquette truly is about being kind, respectful, and considerate to everyone around you. So it's emotional intelligence, right? It's having compassion for other people, understanding, being able to connect with other people. So a lot of that, the good news is that you can learn it. IQ, right? IQ is IQ versus EQ, emotional intelligence. So this statistic that I have here on the screen, a Harvard-Stanford study concludes that one success, particularly in the workplace, is based 85% on social skills and less than 15% technical skill set. So when you think about that, I use this quote in my book as well. What does that mean? You could be the smartest person in the room, both socially or professionally when it comes to your IQ. But if your emotional intelligence isn't on par or where it should be, then you might still have a little bit to work on. So etiquette is all about understanding and kind of connecting with people. So that's a lot about what I teach. So people often come to the Plaza Hotel and they know every single fork or knife, or they know they've read every single Emily Post book, which yes, I have them too, and I love them. But there's so much more to etiquette, and it's about connecting with people. And now during COVID, during this pandemic, I don't know about you all, but I think I'm constantly hearing the same, that without this social interaction, we're kind of even starting to lose a little bit of that. Social anxiety has come back a little bit, right? We're not seeing each other face to face. And suddenly one day the thought of being invited to an event and having to network again might be a little overwhelming. So today I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of kind of what was in both my books, but also coming up. So I'm going to cover a little bit about holiday etiquette, pandemic etiquette, what do we do with that mask at the dining table, and a little bit of more of the classics as well. Okay, so let's start here. 7 seconds. So in my book, in the first book, Modern Etiquette Made Easy, I give a lot of kind of acronyms or things that I have made up to help you remember certain teaching techniques. So there's one it's actually in the second chapter, excuse me, and it's called the 7 and 7 theory. And what this is, it's essentially my theory that you have 7 seconds to make a first impression, which we know, we've heard time and time again, we've heard through many studies. But I actually think there are 7 things in those 7 seconds that if you do those, you can kind of instantly elevate your reaction that you're going to get from other people. And it's really easy. Once you know those 7 things that you should be doing those 7 seconds, it's really easy to kind of become a social chameleon and create the impact that you want with whoever you're meeting, whether it's online, whether it's in person. So I just want to go over what those are. And although in this presentation, I don't have time to go through in depth all those 7 things, I did choose 2 of those things to teach you today. But the rest of them, of course, are my book. So the first thing I want you to do also is remember first impressions nowadays, especially during this pandemic, everybody is, your first impression is often online. Right? So your homework after this, if you have not Googled yourself in the last month, and you can also set Google alerts too for your name, your company, if that's easier, but is really to Google yourself. Because according to a recent study by Business Insider, 65% of people, the moment they hear or see your name, will Google you. So you want to know what's coming up in the news section of Google. So that's the most recent kind of articles about yourself. Maybe it's your LinkedIn profile. Maybe it's your Instagram profile. Often the top things that show up are SEO related. So it's going to usually be your social media profiles, even if it's on private. What does your photo look like? And then also, then I want you to image Google too. So see what pops up. Is it that picture from spring break when you were in college, or was it, a professional photo and you are applying for jobs right now? So you really just want to make sure of that. Now, in terms of those 7 things that I was talking about earlier, I've listed those on the right. Now, it's physical placement, like how you actually place yourself in the room. It's your facial control, personal presentation, so how you dress yourself, how you groom yourself, your posture, your voice, your body language, and charisma. So those are the 7 things. Now, one thing kind of in the very beginning of the books, I also say is don't fake it until you make it. Practice it until you become it. That's a quote that I use in a lot of my teachings, and my students kind of always say it and tell me, they're like, Mike, I keep saying that. So I was like, I'm going to put that in my book because it's so true. I don't want you to be anyone else but yourself, but I want you to be your best self. And the way that you can do that is simply practicing until it feels natural. That's all that means. So here, for instance, on those 7 things, I just want to point out the charisma part. Some people say, well, sure, people with charisma are going to turn heads. Of course, they're going to make a great first impression. But aren't you, don't you have to be born with charisma? Isn't, being charismatic, isn't that something you have by nature? Not always. You can learn charisma. And how the one little thing I want to point out about charisma, and I give a lot of these kind of tips throughout my teachings, is that charisma, being charismatic, all it is, it's really likability, right? In the end, because we're attracted to charisma, we're attracted to confidence. But all charisma is evoking positive emotion in someone else. Not any emotion, not evoking any emotion, evoking positive emotion. So when I walk into the room, when I see your face on the other end of the screen, how do I make you feel? And that is the goal. I want to make you feel great. So when I go to a cocktail party, when I go to, home for the holidays, when I go, if there's a birthday party and we're doing a Zoom birthday party, the moment I'm on, I'm, not slumped over. I have presented myself in a way that you feel like I've put myself together for you. I'm not laying in bed with my pajamas on. I obviously have, positioned myself. So I'm saying, I respect you. So I put myself together for you. I've also would probably want to make you feel good. I'd compliment you. I find something to say. Wow, I so missed you. It's so great to see you. Last year, it's been so long, you look fantastic, whatever it is that I want to make, how I make that person feel good. But that's the secret to charisma. People with charisma make other people feel good. So remember that. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out, so of these 7 points that I kind of pulled out today, is voice and verbiage. So to make the best first impression, I talk a lot about voice and verbiage. So I always say, people say, well, how do you become instantly more polished? And a lot of it is your voice, right? Especially over the phone, when you're speaking, when you're giving a presentation, when you're meeting someone in person, when you're on a dating app, whatever it might be. And then you have that first conversation, that voice is still your first impression. So what I want you to do is remember that first point there is enunciate and articulate. This is so important because it's one of the first things that you can do to make yourself sound more confident, right? Because I could walk in and I could sit here and say this. I could say this. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It was really nice that you joined me today. But did I have any confidence when I just said that? No. And that's all voice. I looked the same. I just didn't speak the same way. So your voice is so important for a first impression. There's 3 parts of your voice that everyone, unless you're a professional TED Talk presenter, should work on. And that's your pitch, your pace, and your pause. The most important being, or most common, I should say, is pitch. Either you speak monotone and you want to have 2 points of inflection in every sentence to show maximum engagement. So there's a lot of ways that you can work on your voice. Also words, kind of like I use the words present and most as examples, because often in American English, we skip over some of these hard syllables. So we say it's mostly cold out, or it's mostly warm, or I'm going to present next week for you, instead of I'm going to present next week for you. It's going to mostly be young gentlemen from the Navy. I just made that up, but you get what I'm saying, right? So that's very important too. Now, no swearing, take out filler words. The most common are ah, and like. And of course, add in sophisticated words where you can. So sophisticated words kind of throw people off that you're not used to saying. So for instance, if brilliant, and that's a word that I kind of took from the British when I was living in London, a lot of Americans don't use the word brilliant. So when someone says, Myka, how was the jog yesterday? And I say, it was the most brilliant day. it kind of sets people off because they're not used to hearing that word. So I always say create a list for your sophisticated verbiage list, and it really does change the way that you speak and also that people perceive you. Okay, the other point I want to point out is, of course, posture. So posture is one of the things where you could be wearing the most stunning gown in the room, the most sharpest suits that is in your closet. But if you are walking into a room and you're slouched, or you're sitting to the side, or you're just kind of, that's your presentation, then it shows lack of confidence. So whether you sit or stand, you also want to make sure that your posture is very strong, that your back is straight. You can test posture by walking up to a wall and then seeing you actually want to stand up straight against a wall, and you don't want the whole of your back to touch the wall, believe it or not. You just want the tops of your, kind of the backs of your shoulders and your tailbone to touch the wall. And then you want a slight curve in your back, and that's actually really good posture. If your whole back is touching the wall, that means you're slouching. So that's a posture test you can do. And then here's 3 examples of there are many examples of sitting correctly, but here are 3 that I use. 2 for on the left there, knees and ankles together. You can see I'm not crossed. If you're smaller, more petite in positioning, then you can actually try that left position, but with your knees and ankles straight on. So without that slant. That's what the Queen of England does. And she's tiny, 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 and she always looks perfectly poised. So knees and ankles together and then facing forward, or you can do that left position there, which is what we call famously the Duchess slant, which is a term that I created literally in my basement years ago that kind of took off, which is exciting. And then the middle, we call that the Cambridge cross, of course, inspired by the Duchess of Cambridge. Where your knees and ankles are still crossed. So imagine you have a rubber band over your knees and then your ankles. That would be the correct way to see when you want to sit, when you want to cross your legs. There are, again, many different positions for sitting, but these are just 2 that I like, that always look poised and polished. Then gentlemen, one sitting position that you might do more commonly is just sitting with your knees hip width apart, and then your feet flat on the floor. That's very comfortable usually for most gentlemen. If you do want to cross, that picture on the right there shows this gentleman crossing one over the other. But here's what I want to point out. You cannot see the bottom of his shoe. So no matter who is in the room, we can't see the bottom of his shoe. So if he's walking up to the Plaza Hotel and he steps in fluorescent green gum, he's not going to show that off to the world. We're only going to see his beautifully polished shoes. So just a couple positions there to make you feel instantly more polished, especially at that first impression. Okay, meetings, greetings, and introductions. So there is something in both of the books that I wrote. So the one I showed you before is the yellow one, Modern Etiquette Made Easy. And then that came out in January of this year, 2020. And then in May, on May 5th, smack dab in that first pandemic phase, then I launched this book, which was Business Etiquette Made Easy. So both are for all genders and just modern versions of etiquette, but one is more social graces, which is the yellow one, and the business one is the blue one, Business Etiquette Made Easy. So a couple things there that I really think are important. The HACH system of greetings is something, if you Google HACH system of greetings, only my face pops up because it's just an acronym I created to help my students and my clients. So it means handshake, air kiss, cheek kiss, hug. And that's it. Very simple. And outside of those 4 formal greetings, and I must note this is pre-pandemic, so I'm going to get to now during the pandemic and touching, this would have been what we would recommend. Do I think the handshake is coming back? I definitely one day think the handshake will be back, not for a while still, but I still think this is important to show you because I do think we will one day be coming back to normal. So the handshake, one just really quick thing to say, we always shake hands while standing, not sitting. So if someone comes up to my table and I'm at a restaurant and they introduce themselves, I don't sit like this. I always rise to shake and then I sit back down like that. Web to web, so it's right hand to right hand. The web of my hand should touch the web of the other person's hand, again, post-pandemic. 2 pumps in business or 3 socially, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3 for socially, because you have a little bit more to talk about. And of course, eye contact the entire time. Then we have the A of the HACH system is air kiss. The C is for cheek kiss, and the H is for hug. So what do you do? What's appropriate to do kind of with social graces, I would say. The handshake and the air kiss are the most common for people that you're not super familiar with, especially we live near or in New York City. If, no matter where you live, if you live near a big city, you often get that air kiss. More often, the cheek kiss and the hug are reserved for close friends, family, and children. So what is the difference between the air kiss and the cheek kiss? The air kiss is actually what you would probably want to do in the pandemic, which is where you actually, your lips never touch someone else's skin. So it's when you see someone and you're approaching them, you have a distance, and like that, you never touch their skin to yours. The cheek kiss is where my lips touch your cheek. And it's depending on the country you're in, is the amount of kisses you give. So here now, talking about social distancing greetings. So nowadays, believe it or not, to give a handshake or to extend your hand during the pandemic is actually considered the opposite of good etiquette, because by extending your hand, you're not being socially conscious of everyone around you. And we, right now, of course, with the CDC guidelines, are still advising not to have physical contact with one another. So by not wearing a mask, or by not shaking hands, I'm not saying always, may, depending on where you are, if there's a rule, for instance, walking into a restaurant that you should keep 6 feet and also wear a mask, then you should follow those guidelines. Now, one option that you can follow instead of the handshake during the pandemic is something I call the stop, drop, and nod. That is where you are approaching somebody. You stop, you're 6 or even say 8 feet distance away from them. You drop your hands, you put them behind your back, clasp them behind your back, showing you're not shaking hands. And then you would nod, while at the same time saying, I'm so sorry we can't shake hands today. You know how much I wish we could, but it's so lovely to see you. So it's a verbal addressing with that physical, I'm not shaking hands. And then the other is the grasp and greet, which is what I'm showing there. That's a picture from my Instagram. That's actually a video, a freeze from a video that I put up there to show you both of these. And essentially what you're doing is you're grasping one hand over the other. So you're showing, I'm not going to be shaking hands. You're putting it just against your heart. And again, the same messaging as you approach someone, I wish we could shake hands, but I just want to make sure we keep you nice and healthy. So it's not kind of pointing out that they might be sick. It's saying, I'm looking out for you. And that is a way to make everyone feel safe and welcome. That line there at the bottom of the page, I just included because if you don't know what to say or you feel awkward, I'm going handshake free to be extra careful. And you can say that. I actually had a friend who texted me before coffee last week, and she said, are we hugging? Are we kissing? What are we doing? And I have asthma, so I'm being extra careful. So I kind of just said, being so careful right now, but you know how much I wish I could hug you. And it's fine to say that as well. People understand right now. Okay, introduction. So no matter if you are on a Zoom call, no matter if you are in person, the order of introductions stay the same. So basically what you want to do, if you are in a room one day when we're all networking, we're all at some fabulous cocktail party, or we see each other at a restaurant again, or you come to my class, or whatever it might be, we will be introducing other people. And the number one thing I want you to remember, both socially and in business, is that the most VIP person comes first. That is the key to modern etiquette. So what does this mean? Before, even 30 years ago, if you're reading through a lot of your older etiquette books, you will see that the lady always is introduced first, female's name followed by a male's name. That is no longer correct when it comes to modern etiquette. And so as per both of my books, I give the VIP role. Who is the most important person? And that person's name comes first. So if we are in a business situation, and the president of our company is a female, then the female's name will come first. If the president of the company is a male, then the male's name will come first. It's just whoever is most important. If that person has a spouse or a partner, they're introduced together as the VIP, by the way. And then you would list everybody else. So if it's Frank, and Frank's my boss at the firm, I would say, Frank, may I please? And that's the most formal way to introduce someone, may I please? Frank, may I please introduce you to Jenny? And then that's how it would be. So Also, the other two orders of introduction are seniority. This is usually in more social situations. Grandma, may I please introduce you to little Johnny? Would be showing the respect for the senior person. And then say everybody at a cocktail party is the same exact playing field. Nobody has a doctor title. Nobody has, seniority. We're all the same age. Then it would be female's name followed by male's name. So Jessica, may I please introduce you to Jack? Jack, I'm so happy you're here today. Jessica's been part of the neighborhood committee for the last 10 years, and I know she'll introduce you to everybody at the party. So you're giving them something to talk about, but I'm always introducing the female before the male if everybody's in the same playing field. And that's what that last point, don't make a mirror introduction, means. Jack, please meet Lucy. Lucy, please meet Jack, because you give them nothing to talk about. So you always, as a good host or friend, want to give them something to talk about. So just one tip there. Okay, moving on, looking professional online. So when you're speaking on Zoom, Zoom is a whole new ballgame when it comes to etiquette, as we all have figured out so far. So just a couple tiny tips. I could talk about this. I teach an entire course just on Zoom etiquette for companies. So it was hard to choose a couple slides, but just a few things. First thing, I just want to point out, camera on or off. So if you are on a call, and for instance, my daughter's school, they'll say camera should be on or camera's optional. If you're the one hosting a call, you should tell people, because there's nothing worse. And this did happen to my husband, actually, where he had the camera off and was on silent. And then the school said, excuse me, could you turn your camera on? And he just wasn't prepared for that. He just wasn't prepared. And of course he did, but he kind of shifted to be in a more professional background and not just with, in the middle of the nursery. So I think just if you're hosting, let people know ahead of time, expect that you would have your camera on. And if you get on and everybody doesn't have their cameras on, then you can be off too, but that's just one thing there. But make sure that you have that clean background. It's not messy, nothing too distracting. This actually behind me, I just want to point out, for business or social, this, see, is a curtain. So you can, behind me, for all you know, could be my kitchen. But it's just a nice setup space. So you can buy this on Amazon. Also, another tip, you just want to make sure, I have headphones on. If you hear any background noise at all, it kind of fuzzes it out. My daughter right now is probably still awake upstairs, but hopefully you cannot hear her. Now, place the camera. So you want that camera to be chest or kind of at least chest or higher. So if it is too low like that, and I'm kind of looking at you like that, it doesn't work, or too high like so, and you're just getting kind of the tips of my face, you just want to kind of angle it so it's kind of chest level and higher. And what I usually do is I actually take a couple books to stack up my computer so that I'm eye line with my camera, because that can be very important to making people feel like you're connecting with them when it's really hard to do so electronically. But that's just one tip. So right now I've got, actually, this is a picnic basket, is the truth, that I have you on top of, but it could be anything, but people don't see it, which is the good part. Okay. So a couple other things, look at the camera, not the screen. So right now, if I'm looking at my screen instead of you like this, it's a big difference, right? If I'm just looking down at my computer screen. So if you have to reference your computer, then your screen, then you can always come up. But if you are giving a presentation, make sure you know the presentation, because there's nothing worse than someone just looking the whole time and not at the audience. So that's one tip there that I think makes a big difference when you are on a Zoom call. And then really just, I think these are a couple other just basic tips, but one is just in business, make sure you're not eating or drinking. A glass of water is fine. Or if it's a working meeting and it's over an hour and you have your cup of coffee, that's okay, of course, to take a sip. But eating, drinking, it's just a distraction, can be seen as unprofessional. So just be cautious there in terms of you're eating and drinking online. Meetings, conference calls, and video conferences, a couple other things. Just make sure when you send an invite, even like today for this session, there was an invite, then there was a reminder. So those are so important. Just reminds people at the top of their inbox where to go, how to click, very easy. And it's really just making sure that people are prepared. They've got a number to call if they need to, and that you as the host kind of give them all the rules that they need. And before I always log on, I read my video conferencing notes ahead of time that I've been sent to see if there's anything that I should be aware of. Should we all be on mute? Should we not be on mute? Should our cameras be on, cameras off, and things like that. Now, this last point on here is so important because it's called the minute rule. And I include this in the business book and the social book because it's so important. So being late, right? We all know that that's bad manners, but why? It's actually seen as a lack of care for someone else's time. So it's in consideration, right? So you're not being considerate of somebody else's time. So if I'm here, just as bad as it is to be on a conference call and hearing elevator music, it's the same for Zoom, to be in a black room or to be waiting when you should be in and chatting. So my general rule of thumb, whether it's an in-person meeting, a coffee, or a Zoom call, is for every minute you think you're going to be late, you give 2 minutes notice. And this is my go-to rule of thumb. So if I'm on my way to a coffee in person with you, or I have a conference call with you and I'm running 5 minutes late, I will let that person know within 10 minutes to give them that time so they're not already on the Zoom call and then they get the bling pop-up text that you're running late. So you can use that general rule of thumb. Okay, so emails, we're doing a lot of emailing right now, that I know. So this is something that I think is so important because it's kind of really right now the future of communication for the foreseeable future in terms of kind of our go-to. So I wanted to highlight a couple of my favorite tips for email etiquette so you can kind of go in and out feeling super confident in your emails. Now, who goes in the CC versus recipient line? The recipient line is that main area that you put the one person that you might be talking to. Now, CC means carbon copy. So who goes in that carbon copy section? It's actually nobody that you would be addressing in the email. So if I'm writing to my attorney and my attorney's name is John, and I want to CC John's PA, and John's PA is Eric. Now, if John and Eric, if I'm only talking to John, then John's name goes in the recipient section and Eric's name goes in the CC section. And then when I write my email, it's just Dear John, comma. It's not Dear John and Eric. Because if I want to say Dear John and Eric and I'm talking to them both, then Eric's name goes in the recipient line as well. That's the difference. Now, I think bullets, concise lines, I think it's very important to know that after 5 kind of bullet points or sections of writing, people technically, the drop rate of retention is so dramatic. So after 5 bullets or sentences or small paragraphs, people just start scanning. So you should know that and always just minimize your writing. The longer your emails, the less likely people are to absorb that information. Acronyms. So writing, thank you so much for attending. Please let me know ASAP, right? That's an acronym, the ASAP. And often that can sound like shouting. So in formal etiquette, email etiquette, at some of the colleges we teach at, we always spell out everything. So the more formal the etiquette, the less acronyms you would have. The same with spelling the and sign, just and D. It can come across as lazy to just put the and sign or, whatever symbols that you use. It's kind of called text language. And in emails, it's not appropriate for formal emailing. So you're applying for that job. You are sending, a formal email. You want to make sure you're following these rules. Now, draft of a subject line. So your subject line should be where possible 5 words or less, and only capitalized in that first word. No punctuation where possible, and proper salutations. So for formal email, now I'm saying formal here, you want to start with dear, or if dear feels very formal to you, you can say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. If that still feels really, really formal, then hello is better than hi. But just for formal etiquette, those are our suggestions. And the best sign off is best regards when it comes to formality. You can also say best wishes if that's more for you, or kind regards, best regards. Those are some options, but those are the most formal when you are emailing an etiquette. Okay, so these are a couple of my email etiquette don'ts, because these are very important and I think very commonly done. So I wanted to list them specifically. I talk a lot about email etiquette in my business etiquette book, because it's without thinking, we kind of just send off emails really fast, and often you forget that that's your first impression, or you forget that those are going to be printed out and passed around at a meeting. So just a couple ones here I just want to run through with you. As discussed. Now, you might have written an email today that says, as discussed, and be thinking, oh my goodness, don't panic. It's very common. But the reason why we don't say as discussed is because you can't read the tone of an email. You can't hear somebody's voice, right? So when you write as discussed, it can come across condescending. Like, it can be, for example, dear Myka, as discussed, we want to go over the 5 da, 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 da. And it almost can be like, as discussed. Instead, I might have just meant it, hi Myka, like as per our discussion, but that's better than as discussed. You can also, instead of just take out as discussed or as per our discussion, you could just say in regards to. That's what I personally use. No problem is a problem. So if somebody asks me to do something, Myka, can you please have this on my desk by 9 a.m. tomorrow? And I write back, no problem. Now, why is that a problem? Because again, you can't read tone. And I might have written back, no problem. Of course, I'm happy to have it 9 a.m. You've got it. But the person on the other end might be reading, no problem. Right? So that was my most annoyed look there for you. But so you can't read tone. So you want to make sure that there is no mistaking within your tone. So hi and hello, as I just told you, we try to avoid it. If you must use one of those two, hello is the only option for me. Hi is text language and very informal. When you are using hi, that should be to somebody that is like the colleague next to you in the next desk, your best friend, a good friend, your neighbor, something like that. But for formal etiquette, we even stay away from those. Internal images and only documents. I think that might be so obvious, but you never know. Sometimes forwarding emails, you never forward someone's email to another person without telling them first. William, I'm going to be forwarding this email, and then give that person a chance to say, well, no, could we actually start a fresh one, or could you just send the attachment? But I actually don't usually forward any emails. I usually just copy and paste the information that I want to, because if you have an email forwarded and you didn't know or you didn't intend to have it forwarded, and then it's always a little bit jarring to see that. Now, including emojis in formal business etiquette or business emails, is a no-no, because although it does come off nice and fluffy and fun, for formal etiquette, we do not include emojis. It can come across as a little too casual. And then capitalization and exclamation points. Exclamation points is my big one. I use probably 1 million of them, and I always have to go through after my email writing and take them out where I see too many. Okay, showing respect in business, just a couple things here that I want to highlight. So invitations and RSVPs, right now we're getting a lot of evites, right? So for evites and anything like any invitations you get, virtual weddings, make sure that you send your reply as soon as you know if you can make it or not. If you reply last minute, if the RSVP is, says December 1 and you reply on December 1, it almost looks like you were waiting for a better occasion to come along. And then last minute you said, okay, I'll fine. Nothing else came up, I'll go. So, and the other thing is, if you are sending out an invitation, you don't want to say, please RSVP to. Why? Because RSVP, that P in RSVP is please in French. S'il vous plaît, the P. So you're saying please, respond please, and it's just redundant and we don't need it. So if you have any other, and ladies first for business etiquette, and in particular, is very important not to use nowadays, because especially in business, you hold a door open and say, ladies first, you're pointing out business and gender. And there are actually some large banks that we do consulting for here in the United States that have actually made it in their manuals as a do not use term. And you actually can be called to human resources by pointing out someone's gender nowadays. I know some of you are probably thinking, what is she talking about? But it's true. We don't want to ever point out gender, especially in business, to show that we gave preference or not to a gender. So that is the future of business etiquette. Okay. Now I just wanted to give you an example of one of the confidence formulas that I give throughout the books. I give a formula on how to be more confident, how to be more charismatic, literally step by step, how to become more authoritative. So this was just an example, but the point that I really wanted to make up here is that there's confidence and there's self-esteem. And what's the difference and what's most important? Confidence is what other people see and what you project initially. Confidence can change from moment to moment. I could be very confident and then 5 minutes later I could feel not confident. But what's important is that on a Zoom call or in a business pitch or at a date, a first date, or at a, sitting in in a restaurant, in a social situation, I project confidence. Self-esteem takes a lot of work and can take years or even a lifetime to improve. And that's a little bit more deep-seated. So I give a lot of confidence formulas, things like that to help you instantly. That's my whole book, is kind of how to instantly feel and look more confident through etiquette, really. So I just wanted to highlight that. Now, last but not least, before we go to our Q&A, is dining etiquette, because I could not teach a session without dining etiquette. Okay, and also if at the end, if you have any questions about, how to handle political conversation over the Thanksgiving table, that's your time to ask that. Or, where do I put my mask at the dining table? I will talk about now. But anything else that I don't include, then please ask at the end. But where does your mask go on this table setting? The answer is nowhere. The mask should never touch your table. So as soon as you take off your mask, you should actually either carry around a paper bag, just like a little paper lunch bag. They're actually selling them on Amazon. Some restaurants are giving them out. Or if you have a mask that's attached by a string, you can do that and put it around the back. If you have a paper bag, you put it in the paper bag and you put it in your handbag, you put it, in your jacket pocket, whatever it might be, but you never put it on the table, because your table should remain clean and germ-free. Instead of taking that mask you just had to protect yourself and placing it on the table where everybody eats. A couple things to point out here. So I'm just kind of these are some points here that I'm now coming back to just here. So how do you know if you're setting the table at home? How do you know how and where and why? I just want to point out a couple key indicators. So the fork always goes on the left-hand side of the table. How do we remember that? Because the fork has 1, 2, 3, 4 prongs, and the word left, L-E-F-T, has 4 letters. So we know the fork always goes on the left. The knife has 5 letters. So does the word right, R-I-G-H-T. So we know that the knife goes on the right-hand side of the table. Note that the blade faces in toward the plate. So if we have a spoon, where should we put that spoon? The spoon has 5 letters. So does the word right, R-I-G-H-T, S-P-O-O-N. The spoon would go on the right. So this is a soup spoon. The water glass is directly above the main dining knife, which is the knife closest to the dinner table in American dining. And then that second glass to the bottom right would be for, say, wine or orange juice or whatever other drink that you were drinking. And then on the left there, you see that is a bread plate. We can always remember that the bread plate goes on the left by, if you're a car person, BMW, bread, meal, water, wine, coffee, tea. So all your beverages on the right, your bread plate on the left. Okay, and then really just, hands above the table or below the table. This is something that I think is really important. So hands like this, I just did an Instagram video on this. So it really depends on the country you're in. In America, also in England, your hands stay under the table until your meal comes and then your hands come up. But in many parts of Europe, South America, Latin America, it depends on the country. You would keep your wrists almost like rested. I'll do this so you can see, like rested on the table like that. And that would be the correct place setting or positioning for your hands. Here, I just wanted to show you napkin etiquette. If anybody wants an example, I do have a napkin next to me I can show you in the Q&A section. But really, it's just showing that the correct place to place your napkin when you go to the restroom or out for a cell phone call. Then you'd place it in your chair. And at the end of the meal, to signify to service staff that you're finished, it goes to the left of the place setting. So you can see those pictures there. That's me at the Plaza. And then last but not least, I just want to include, this is in my book is an entire, there's multiple sections on dining and chapters throughout both of those, but I always teach how to eat in the continental form and also the American as well. So you can see, and I teach the differences as well. And all it is, if you have the fork, no matter if you're left-handed or right-handed, fork goes on the left, knife goes on the right, just like that. And so it's balancing on my index, and it's index, wrap, and twist. Just like that. So I don't have McDonald's arches. I have flat fingers there. So again, it's index, wrap, and twist. And I have a whole bunch of images in the book to explain it and go over it. And then you cut, and prongs down. Like so. So I could teach for hours and hours. I'm so passionate about etiquette, but I did want to leave some time for questions. Here is on the left, the break position, what you do when you're cutting and you go into the break. So every 4 bites or so, you take a break, and there's the upside down V. And on the right, you see the finished position. So fork on the left, prongs up, and knife to the right of that, blade facing in. And that in American etiquette shows that you're finished. And that's a signifier to both your host at a private home or even at a restaurant. So just a couple things there. And then that note, I know that's a lot of information, but I wanted to fit in as much as I could from both of the books in terms of highlights for you all.
Thank you so much, Myka. That was fabulous. I actually really enjoyed the section. So much of modern etiquette has changed over the years, and also with the pandemic, there's a lot of awkwardness. And my sense from reading your book is that so much of etiquette is about making people feel comfortable. So we do have a question about that. One of the questions is, what do you see as the most significant change in etiquette in the last 20 to 40 years? What do you think was the most positive change, and what do you think was maybe not such a good change?
I would say the most positive change is gender related. So a lot of I have a collection of etiquette books. If you ever come to my office in Columbus Circle, I collect etiquette books, and I've got some of the oldest etiquette books that exist on this planet. But even ones from the 50s, 60s, 70s, even some in the 80s say that women should stay seated. And when someone comes to the table, they shouldn't speak. The man should only speak, and then they would introduce the woman, and only then she could speak. And that was in business and social. So things like that, I think it was, they're very good that we have changed those things, and it's really just empowering both genders, or all genders, I should say, excuse me. And then I think the thing that has changed that I don't like is maybe, well, 2 things probably. My biggest pet peeve in etiquette is not showing respect for people in need. And I feel like that has been lost generally as a society. So my heart just aches. I'll run across the street just to open up a door for an elderly person if I see it. So I think but that's not something that's necessarily changed, but I did want to point that out. But what has changed would be, I would say, the constant use of technology. I think that is, you're seeing people at a beautiful meal at a beautiful restaurant and on their phones when the people they should be talking to are there. To see, be at a family home and see everyone on their phones instead of talking to each other around the dining table. I have rules at my tables where when we have guests come in, I throw a fondue party, and I literally had everybody, and it was all close friends, so it was fine, but I had everybody put their phones in the kind of the area when we first came in before we went out to have our fondue party. But also something you can do at home too, and collect it from your children, from your, partners. But I think that, and maybe the online bullying too. Sorry, I could go on for a while, I guess, on this one, but online bullying, I really think is a sad thing too, that we have to be very conscious of as a society.
I should mention that I have teenagers who are way too plugged into technology, and Myka does teach teen etiquette. So if my daughter is sent back from school with the pandemic and they send the kids back from college, I might have to sign her up, because they do plug into technology in so many inappropriate ways. She could use.
Yes. Well, we do have, we teach virtually. We actually just opened again in our office for in-person private tuition, but which is one-to-one training. And we also do train virtually, and we have webinars on my website for teens that are live right now, that are just for teens. So, we do a lot of virtual training, but we have those webinars so you can watch them whenever you want with your child, too, which I think is really important, or stick them in the room and be like, okay, let's have a conversation when you get back out and tell me what you learned, which can, if you feel like they would do better that way as well.
Great. So I have a couple of hopefully really simple questions. First one, where do you put the sugar packet? I'm assuming this is a paper sugar packet after you put sugar in your tea or coffee.
Okay, so if you don't have a second saucer to put it on, then what I would recommend is there's two parts of every plate you should know. So the top, so 11 o'clock. So if this is my plate, think about it as a clock. At 11 o'clock is for discards. So that could be a lemon rind, that could be a jar of honey, that could be your sugar packet. So 11 o'clock. And then when you're eating at a dining table and you've got a larger plate, sauces and butters go at 5 o'clock. So ketchup or mustard or something like that. So it's the same whether you're dining or having a cup of tea. It would be 11 o'clock would be your discards for your tea packet or sugar packet.
Great, thank you. Another question, what do you think of the elbow bump as a greeting?
Oh, wow. So yes. Okay. So this is very commonly used. I would say avoid it at all costs. And here's why. So we are teaching people. I actually did a story in the Times about this exact thing. So we're teaching people with etiquette, and by CDC guidelines, not to cough and sneeze in their hands anymore because you're more likely to touch things. We're teaching people to cough and sneeze. Say you couldn't get to a tissue fast enough in their elbow. So what happens with achoo and then going to fist pump to elbow pump? That's the problem, right? It's much easier to, I think that is the problem. So I avoid it. I don't like it. I think it's dangerous. I think people forget to wash their elbow regions, and if they're coughing and sneezing there and then bumping you, that's how things spread. So I would avoid that as an option for greeting.
Thank you. Here's an interesting one regarding sustainability. What do you think of Christmas cards, paper, e-cards? There are people affected by climate sensitivity and resources, and there are traditionalists who feel that a digital greeting is inappropriate.
Yes. So, okay. So this is interesting. Somebody asked this last week too. And to be honest, before last week, I had not thought about it. So I think we are going to be seeing way fewer holiday cards this year. I think that it is okay to not send your holiday card if you don't want. They're beautiful, beautiful e-cards you can send. If you're a traditionalist and you want to send them, I think people will still love them. But I think if you don't want to, for whatever reasons, it could be financial, it could be environmental, it could be pandemic, you should feel no pressure to send one. I think they're beautiful. Like I said, virtual invitations, e-cards now that you can do. I know Zazzle and Minted have increased their entire online virtual cards because they expect this to happen with people. So I think, I haven't decided, to be perfectly honest, I haven't decided yet if I'm going to be sending one virtually or paper yet. I am a traditionalist with my paper. I always send thank you cards, but I'm just not sure yet. I haven't decided. I think I probably will send printed ones, but I don't know.
I'm a traditionalist too, but I do encourage the people watching. There are a lot of companies now that have green papers out there, so you don't have to feel guilty if you do that. So I'm trying to cluster. You have so many questions coming in, so I'm trying to cluster these because we just have a few more minutes.
Perfect. And wait, I'm so sorry. Can I say one more thing? Adam,
of course.
So also the Duchess of Cambridge uses e-cards just to make you feel better. So if the Duchess of Cambridge uses e-cards, then I think we can pass a year if so, and it's for her, it's environmental. So if she does it, I think we can do it too. But yes, I just wanted to add that in.
That's wonderful. Okay, so There's some question, I think this is a great one. What do you think is a reasonable time to respond to a business email?
So my general rule within Beaumont Etiquette for our company is where possible, same day, but definitely within 24 hours. So business day of when that was sent. So if somebody wrote you at 3 o'clock today, then you should reply by 3 o'clock tomorrow is our guidance. Where possible, you do respond same day, but sometimes that might not be possible. So that's the general business etiquette rule. And I think also expectation, especially if it's customer service related, if you email Beaumont Etiquette, you'll get a response the same day, unless we are so overwhelmed, and it would be within the 24-hour period.
Great. So there have been a few questions. One was emailed earlier and one was just sent in today about being in a situation where you want to avoid talking about something. Someone has an ill member of their family and she goes to these social events and people out of consideration bring it up, ask her how she's doing, where she'd really prefer to just enjoy her night out. Someone's going to a meal in a situation where he would entirely like to avoid the political conversation he's expecting. What do you recommend?
So this is going to come up. It's especially in the next month. It's going to be everywhere, especially through Thanksgiving. It's going to be everywhere. So the first thing I'd like to say is if you are hosting an event, if you're hosting Thanksgiving, if you're hosting a dinner party, if you and your family sitting around a dinner table just won't agree on something, or you might and you just don't want to bring it up, then you can set that rule as a host ahead of time, or even when you sit down and say, tonight is just, a meal for friends and family. We won't be talking about politics this evening because I want to keep it all about, us as a family and wonderful things. So let's reserve those conversations for another time. So you can say that as the host. Now, if you are not the host and you are a guest, or you're just at a table of any kind, for me, I always say it can get heated really fast, right? And so for me, either if there's a conversation over a larger table and I can just choose not to be a part of that conversation, I will just turn to be a part of the conversation of a different side of the table. If that conversation is with me and someone says, so Myka, who are you voting for? And I just don't want to talk about it, or it's none of their business, or for whatever reason, I don't want to, say, I think it's absolutely fine to say, if you're going to, first of all, if you're going to disagree with someone or you currently are disagreeing with them, you can say, I think we're going to agree to disagree on this conversation. So I'd rather talk about something we can all agree on, or we can both agree on. It's okay to say that. If someone just asks you a question you don't want to talk about and you want to avoid it, then, I always say it's a technique that we use in the press whenever you're asked in a live press interview, or like, say I was on the Today Show and it's live and someone asked me a question, then, and I don't want to answer it, then I will just respond with what I do want to talk about. That's an old media training trick. So if someone says, "Oh, Myka, who are you voting for?" And I say, it's definitely going to be an interesting race out there. What I'm really excited about is talking about all the change that I am going to see in 2021 with the Environmentalist Act that has just been put forward by Governor Smith. I'm really excited to see those changes. I'm really involved in cleaning up, whatever. I just made that up. But just to show you that you switch the gears, and if someone says, so who are you voting for? Then I think in that case, you just have to say, I'm keeping that in a, just for myself. And it's just a personal decision that I'm making. But, I think it's going to be an interesting race, and then change the subject. But it's okay to say that. It's okay to say that you don't want to talk about it. I do that all the time. People ask me all the time who I'm voting for, which is bad etiquette, actually, to put someone on the spot like that.
Okay, great. We've got two other questions that are somewhat related. I'm trying to get to them all. We have time for maybe two more questions. So I'm sorry we can't get to everyone, but we will be sending a follow-up email where a lot of the questions as far as how to contact Myka, the Beaumont Etiquette website. We have links to both of her books at our New Canaan Library catalog. And so we're sending a follow-up email that will answer a lot of those questions, but this is a really interesting one. I am I have an attendee asking about first dates, and I have another member asking about tips for conversation starting.
Okay, so for conversation starting, so in this book, I give an entire list of conversation starters depending on the situation you're in. Literally, I don't even know where it is in this book, but it is literally for if you're in a new relationship, if you're and it literally lists out the conversation starters. My biggest thing that I can give you is one tip in the book. It's called WWHC, is an acronym that I created for what, why, how, compliment. And it's a technique I teach in the book. And it really allows for conversation to continue. So essentially, when you're in a conversation, you first start with an open-ended question. So I think I used an example in the book. So Jenny, how do you know the host? And then Jenny would say, oh, we went to school together. And then I start my WWHC. What? Oh, so what was she like in college? Well, she was da-da-da. Then your next question is what? Why? Oh, so why after, college did you move to New York City? And then she answers, and then your next question starts with how. It could be any question. Oh, so how did you end up working at the law firm? And then she answers a question, and then you see compliment. Oh my gosh, that is just so impressive that you were able to make that transition so smoothly. That's incredible. Then you start with the W again. So what are your plans now? Doesn't even matter what you're asking, but that WWHC allows the conversation to keep rolling. So that's one trick. And then for the other question, it was just about first dates.
Yes, any tips you have for, I guess, presenting your
yeah. So, okay. So only go out on a date with somebody that is a short date unless you know it's going to be sparks flying. So if, for instance, only go on a date that's short. That means a coffee. That means a walk in the park. That means an ice cream. That means a glass of wine, whatever it is that is your thing. Make it short. You can always extend it. The worst thing, and when I used to date, I remember accepting a date to a dinner. And it was the longest dinner I think I ever went on, because I knew within the first 5 minutes, as you often do, that it was not going to work. And there was just no chemistry physically or emotionally. We just totally different personalities, nice guy, and I had to sit through a 2.5-hour dinner with this person. So only accept those if you are like sparks flying. And then I think make sure you ask enough questions about them. Don't ask too personal questions about the future on a first date, because people can be overwhelmed by that. So like, so do you want kids? So like sometimes those would be questions that you could probably weed out on an app or things like that. Of course, those are important questions, but just maybe not the first questions. And also the first question should never be, so what do you do? Believe it or not, that can come across as opportunistic. So eventually you can ask, you can figure out what somebody does, but just not the first one. I think always a thank you is very important afterwards. Even if you don't like somebody, never ghost them. I could talk about dating etiquette for a long time, but also any questions that we don't get to here, I answer so many questions on my Instagram, not in the DMs, but in the comment section. If you go through my comments on my Instagram, which is just at Myka Meier, at MykaMeier, I literally am chatting with people all the time. So feel free to poke a question in there, and I'm likely to respond, just so you know.
Thank you. And that will be included in our follow-up email. So here's the very last question. I'm really fascinated to hear your answer to this. How do you handle wedding gifts this year? The canceled weddings, the weddings that would have been a very large celebration, but they're going to the justice of the peace, or they're live streaming something. How do you handle gifts? How do you approach that?
Okay, so I just read an article in The Knot, which you can look up. Just put Myka Meier, The Knot, and I think it will be one of the first ones that comes up. And it was all about this topic because it's a big one, right? We're getting lots of questions about this. My general kind of thought process on this is, if you're invited to a wedding and it's virtual, or let's say you were invited to a wedding in May that then was canceled, I still have been sending, this is me personally, I still have been sending wedding gifts for that original wedding date, because I personally feel like that was their intended wedding date. And because of the craziest world pandemic you could ever imagine, they were unable to get married. So I almost felt like it brought some joy to them. Now, if they didn't get married in the end and they never got married, they should return it technically. But, and then if you are invited to a Zoom wedding, I've been invited to a few Zoom weddings this year, and I have sent gifts for all of them, me personally. And it doesn't have to be some massive gift. It could be very small. It could be thoughtful. It could be a beautiful frame. It could be, they likely will still have a wedding registry. I still am sending gifts because it's not that they don't want us to be there. In a perfect world, we would be. So it's still, you send a gift as gratitude for being invited and to show support of the couple. So both of those things technically don't change. So I would still send a gift. It might not just be the, for whatever, maybe what, means or, financials or whatever your reasoning, it might not be the same gift you would have sent if you were to go to their wedding in California.
Thank you so much. This has been insightful and fascinating. I think everyone's enjoyed it. I'm sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions, but we will send you all information so that you guys can access Myka's books and her website, as well as follow her on social media. So I just really want to thank you. My screen is lighting up with participants thanking you and sharing how much they've enjoyed this. So thank you so much for joining us tonight here at the New Canaan Library. And we're just really grateful you shared your expertise with us.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. And thank you for all your support with my books. And I hope you all become passionate about etiquette. If you weren't already, maybe now you are. So thank you so much. And I'm just always a click away. So thank you for joining me today.
Okay, Myka, you have a wonderful evening, and goodbye to everyone who joined us.